All right. It is past 7. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Thanks everyone for coming out. We'll start with introductions. I do see a couple new faces, so I'll start. My name is Bridget Mancini. I am the Ravalli County Fire Adaptive Communities Coordinator for the DNRC.
I'm Anna Bateson. I work on the Bitter National Forest, the fire prevention officer.
Eric Hoover, Emergency Manager for Ravalli County.
Freddie Broughton with Painless Insurance. Over Babel with Director Farm and Ranch Board.
Big Davis. Ryan Adams with Hampton Fire.
Mark Wilson, Fire Manager on the National Forest.
Laura Jackson. I live here.
I'm Frank Pelfrey. I'm live right outside of Hamilton, up Blodgett, and then I'm with the Bitterroot Climate Action Group representing them.
John McKenna, Victor Fire.
Roy Lindahl, Victor Fire.
Matt Young, Assistant Fire Officer from Bitterroot.
I'm Tom McKay, Public Affairs Officer.
I'm Abby Josie. I'm the district ranger for the Darby-Sula Ranger District.
Mike Kemp, Edward Board of Realtors.
Tom Strand, Credit State Builders and the Bitterroot Building Industry Association.
And Sam Lammy, I work with Forest Service, Geospatial Program Manager in Missoula. It's good enough.
Ken Brewer, Lawrence Fire.
Thanks everyone for coming.
We have 2 folks on Zoom.
Oh, we got 2 folks on Zoom. Darcy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Darcy Hanson with State Farm in Stevensville.
Thanks, Darcy.
Hi all, I'm Krista Mortensen with the DNRC Southwestern Land Office. I am the Community Preparedness and Fire Prevention Specialist there.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. All right. So some old business to start. Judy's got her landscape program. It's still going on. So she's got some posters up at ACE and a few other locations throughout town. People at ACE were noticing people stopping and looking at the signs and picking up information. So it seems like that's making some progress. You've got a billboard up in Hamilton that is addressing human caused fires. So that'll be up for about a month, right?
I thought it was a burning. Debris burning.
Debris burning.
Off of 93.
Yeah,
for a month.
Where's it at?
It's in between here and I want to say what's the next town?
Corvallis.
No, it's the other direction. It's north.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah.
Between here and Stevensville.
So it's in between like here and Stevie.
Okay.
Has anyone seen it? You seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got that up there. We're working on some other outreach, education information, some evacuation checklist type deal. And then May is Wildfire Awareness Month, so we're pushing out a lot of information on our Facebook page. So if you have one of those, get on there, share our information. The more we can spread it, the better. Along with that, you may have seen or you may have not seen the new MailChimp. So for communications for the Fire in the Root, the first one did go to most people's junks or spam. So I did send that email out as well to make sure everyone tried to check there if they didn't get it. And I do have,
Is it this one?
no,
I don't know.
it's the PDF in there. Yeah, it just comes up on there. So if you haven't seen it yet, this is what the newsletter will kind of look like. It's gonna, obviously information is gonna change each week. But it's MailChimp's a much nicer visual way to share information. if you didn't see on there already, also, there's a survey that I sent out. We did get, I think, about 12 responses, so that was pretty awesome to see. I assume, if you want to fill it out later, please do so. We'll continue to discuss these items until we come to a decision, so. I think there is a example of the billboard on there if you keep scrolling. Down. So there's a billboard, that we have up, if you haven't seen that yet. And there's a link to Judy's flyer in there, just above that.
Where's the billboard at?
Between,
I think it's between here and Steve.
yes.
I can get this exact location. We had picked a couple and I'm not that sure of the exact location that Kristen picked. Maybe she knows.
Yeah, I think it's Woodside.
Oh, it's so closer down here. Sorry.
Thanks.
And is it
Lisa.
facing north or south? Do you know? Do you remember?
I can't remember. I want to say facing south. I'll look it up though, let you know.
Thank you. Is this the link you wanted, Bridget?
Yeah, and if it doesn't work, that's fine. And there was Judy's mulch sign that we have up in Ace and a few other locations, just for reference. So yeah, if just make sure you try and get our MailChimp sent to your main inbox and not into that spam. So I might send out a couple emails still in case people aren't getting them. But yeah, just keep an eye out for that MailChimp from here on out. Funding updates. So last I heard, we were potentially going to find out this week about the CWPP update funding. I've not heard anything about that since. So I know the person that was working on it is got a lot of other things going on as well. So she's trying to get that out there. We'll know as soon as it's out there. And again, we probably, even after we get that submitted, we're not gonna see funding until after fire season, probably fall. So we've got a little time before we get that money in. If I get any updates on that, I will let everyone know, obviously, of course. Drew, our new county forester, also applied for some funding through the DNRC, which is separate from that one. Lots of money out there right now. So that should also be an extra little chunk of money that we can utilize for education, outreach, or the CWPP update if it turns out we need some more money to help get that done. There's also going to be another round of the Montana Forest Action Plan coming out. I don't know the exact date for that yet either. But that was the original grant that myself, Anna, and Kristen had put in for when we first started all of this, before this group actually even. So we had written that grant. I've sent it out to everyone several times. Check an old email, it's in there, if you're interested in looking at that. But that we had put in for about $115,000 for various outreach, education projects, programs, so chipper days, creating a home assessment type program, and then also funding a coordinator for this group was a big one of those. So that is, yeah, kind of an update funding update. Anna, am I missing anything else? Okay, all right, that's old business and updates. And then objectives for tonight. So if you saw the survey, tonight's focus is going to be about creating an organizational structure. We'll start there and then kind of go through, identifying a membership structure and roles and responsibilities with that, and then eventually getting to the decision making. So it's a lot of stuff. We're going to work through it piece by piece. So I anticipate it being an ongoing conversation unless we all agree on everything and just make a decision. So we'll see. All right. So, oh yeah. Next, we will have the Bitterroot National Forest present on the Bitterroot Front Project.
I'm gonna let Anna queue up the PowerPoint. Hopefully everybody on the web can see it. I'm Abby Josie again. I'm the district ranger down in Darby-Sula, and this Bitterroot Front project has been something that's been on people's minds for several years now. There was a lot of informal pre-work that went into it a couple of years ago, and now we're in the formal process. So what it is, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what it is, where we're at, what stage we're at this moment in time, and how you all can help us and engage and provide good input so that we move forward into the next phase with good information and represent the community's interests at large. Thank you. I guess I have to say next slide when I'm ready. So, not used to that. So this image, some of you probably remember, I wasn't here that year, but this is definitely an image of Roaring Lion, and it kind of jump-started a lot of conversation around the community about, you know, what are we doing out here on the front? Are we ready for another fire like this? This one, you know, caused a loss of 16 homes. There's some debate about whether or not the home ignition zones were the reason why we lost those homes. There's, you know, some debate about, you know, could that have been stopped at all given the conditions that day? And there are several people in the room here who were here that day and know what those conditions were. But I think the bottom line is, you know, anything that comes roaring out of the front and down towards the valley is going to put a whole lot of folks at risk, a whole lot of private property at risk, the communities at risk, et cetera. So we as an agency, because this one did start on the Forest Service, it was not a natural start. You know, we want to do our part too. And so we'll go to the next slide.
This is a video that you want to play.
Okay, all right, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, I was forgetting about the video.
On July 31st, 2016, an unattended campfire sparked the devastating Roaring Lion Fire near Hamilton, Montana. Within just 24 hours, more than 8,000 acres of the Bitterroot Front had burned, claiming 16 homes and forcing the evacuation of more than 600 families at a cost of $11 million. Through the Bitterroot Front Forest Health Improvement Project, the Forest Service and its state and local partners are collaborating with private landowners. The goal is to develop a long-term landscape-level action plan to help reduce hazardous fuels and protect the Bitterroot community from further catastrophic wildfires like Roaring Lion.
We moved to Bitterroot for the same reasons a lot of other folks have, and then the reason folks stay here is you got amazing natural resources, amazing backdrop community, and you know we love the resources here. We're always out recreating, and I also, as a community member, have concerns with the forest health and what's happening here in this Bitterroot Front.
One of the goals of this project is to take a look at the whole landscape all along the front to determine where the risk is and to determine the best course of action to deal with that. We've had fires in the past and they dot the landscape from here to Missoula. We've also had a fair amount of treatment that we've done over the years, but we need to connect those treatments to make an effective fuel break to be able to protect the private homes along the valley.
In the Roaring Lion fire, that happened so fast and so many people lost property and trees, and it was frightening. That was the first time we thought we've got to get even more serious about taking care of the property and the trees on it, or we'll lose it all and maybe our home.
It's the highest density of homes in the highest fire risk area of the state right now. You know, every July, August, everyone's on edge for what might blow out one of these canyons. The lack of fire in a lot of this landscape over the last century has got us to where we're at. And we're trying to work our way back out of that. But it's going to take a lot of different tools and really the community coming together and figuring out those solutions together.
We need to get in and do some work and be proactive in there before we end up in a Roaring Lion fire situation where we lose a bunch of homes and property. Here in Ravalli County, we're almost 75% public lands. So I think our community expects us to be active in forest management and work collaboratively with Forest Service to get these projects done.
Fire may not happen this year, but in the Bitterroot, fire will happen. There's only one thing that we have any handle on in terms of changing fire behavior, and that's the fuel. Fuel management is critical. We do nothing about weather, can do nothing about topography. It's thinning from below, trying to get all that fuel up off the forest floor so that we prevent surface fire from becoming ground fire. It can devastate an area just like you see in Roaring Lion.
So now we have these conditions where you've got continuous fuel beds across large areas that are being fed by insect and disease and by ingrowth. And then at the same time, you've got people moving in. When the trees are ingrown, there's not as much light coming down to the forest floor. You don't get as much forage, grass, shrubs, those sorts of things. And so then you end up with wildlife having conflict with landowners down below because there's not as much food up in the forest.
This is a prime example of the issue we're trying to address with the Bitterroot front. We've got a lot of small diameter understory trees, but this is what that description of ladder fuel looks like. When a fire comes through here, it gets into these smaller trees, it burns in, and can start those canopies of our larger trees, which in this case is ponderosa pine. But because this stand is so dense, you can hardly make them out. Lots of coarse woody debris that's down. This is also going to contribute to our fire severity and intensity, and also going to make our resistance to control harder if we have a wildfire here. The canopies are all interlaced as well, and again, that contributes to that potential ground fire. We're trying to restore this back to its historic fire regime of low intensity, frequent fires. So if we just allow natural processes to occur in these really dense stands that are dense due to fire exclusion over the last 100+ years and other management actions, we're likely to cause near total mortality when a fire does move through these stands. Whereas when we treat them so they're in the condition of this stand behind us, it's more likely that a low intensity surface fire will move through this and it won't kill the trees.
So what the Forest Service and our partners need to do is communicate to people that yes, the forest is a beautiful place, but it's not in a healthy state. We need to be able to take appropriate management action to restore it to that desirable condition that we want it to be in.
There's a lot more light on the land kind of equipment out there. And a lot of the prescriptions today are very sophisticated. There's very few folks in the woods today that actually are operating a chainsaw all day, every day. Most of it is all mechanical or computerized, optimized machinery. They may look like a big dinosaur, but they can harvest a tree, cut a tree with a strategic surgeon-like approach and put that tree exactly where they want it without damaging a bunch of the resources. If you do the right thing on the ground, you're going to have enough material that becomes available for all the different mills in Montana to benefit from. Large mills, small mills. Plus, you can wind up doing improvements for recreation and wildlife and fisheries. So I think there's way more benefit. The more work that gets done on the ground, the greater these rural communities benefit in terms of economic impact.
Every landowner really wants information, what they can do to protect themselves, protect their neighbors. They realize what the risks are because they lived in the Bitterroots for a number of years and they've seen these wildfires year after year come through and threaten property, and they don't want to be a part of that. They want to know how they can reduce that risk on their property.
It's a renewable resource and they need to be cut. And like up here, when they burnt the understory off of 6 or 8 inches of duff that'd been there forever, you know, sure, some weeds come in. I mean, that's just part of the process, but a lot of grass comes in, and those grasses will keep the elk and the deer up there. And it's just good to go up there, and the understory is good, and there's lots of spacing between the trees, and the natural grasses that have been sitting there for a long time start to really come out.
I mean, everybody wants the trees to be healthy. They want safety for firefighters. They want safety for their own property. I think partnership is the only way we're going to be able to make much progress at all. It's expensive to do property management on your own. So any resources we can get to protect people and property is worth it. But our neighbors have to do it too, or it's a moot point.
It's really tough to, when you have the checkerboard pattern of ownership, you have someone that does a really good job and the next door neighbor does nothing. and they don't want to do anything. So it's just tough. I'm just happy to, as a landowner here, work with the Forest Service or other agencies to get something done.
Fire knows no lines. We need the public and we need the community to come in and voice their opinion on what they think needs to be done across that line. And if we can do things cross boundary between private and national forest, let's say, the better off we're going to be in reducing that risk.
My goal and all the bidders' goals should be to leave this landscape to our kids and the next generations in a better shape than it is right now. And right now, it's in pretty rough shape in spots. The same reason we moved here, and a lot of people moved here and live here, it's this backyard quality of life recreation opportunity, and we don't want to miss that. There's a lot of different resource issues, and I think there's a good solution for all of it, but it's really going to take us coming together as a community.
Okay, the update on the billboard location there.
So Ernest Loop, south of Victor, facing north.
Just before Sheep and Drift.
Yep.
Awesome. So thanks for playing the video. And that was great. I'm not sure how much more I can add to that. And you certainly can recognize a few of the faces in that video. A couple of them are in the room here today or might be. I know Judy's not here tonight, but I think you are all very familiar with Judy's passion for this topic in particular. So a little bit of background, and I've already given you that. It was kind of launched into this project proposal several years ago. There was a number of community meetings that were held to gather input, kind of frame things up for us. Why here, why now? You know the story. You know, we're all at risk. The communities are at risk, the landscape's at risk. And so we're looking at, you know, an urgency that's all around us and been all around us for years, right? The other forests that border us, they definitely have had their fair share of high fire seasons in the last couple of years. It's not a matter of if, but when. You've heard that statement a few times. We're also going to be sharing that message for years to come. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about the project overview, what we're looking at, our timeline moving forward, where we're at now, where we hope to be finished with the process of planning for this project. And then I don't know how much myth busting I'll get into, but that's, you know, that's definitely part of what this group is all about, is trying to tell the story from the perspective of community members who support active management in the forest. And so we'll get into that a little bit too. Next slide. Where is it? Yeah. So this photo is kind of a fire history. This is I want to say, I gotta look at the notes. I didn't look over there. I want to say pre-1985, about more than 20 years ago. And the red polygons that you see on there are fire scars from about that time. On the next slide, you can see more recent history, and then this is long-term history, 100 years worth of fire scars across this landscape. We're looking at the front from on your left is south, and on the right is the north end of the valley. And so you can see that there's a lot of landscape out here that has been affected by fire in the past, some natural, some not. And so that's what we're really dealing with. You can see there's areas that have not had big fire events. And we may or may not have been doing active management there. But it's places that we need to be taking a hard look at, and what should we be doing there. And we're also facing a situation where we have a wilderness boundary right across there. And so we have interface issues that go right up along the face of the front. And in a lot of places that the private land interface goes halfway up that slope. And a lot of folks don't realize that when you're standing down here in the valley and you're looking up at the slope, that private land goes quite a ways up there. And then the Forest Service starts. And in some places, the wilderness boundary is not too far up that slope from where the private land boundary is. And then other places we have a little bit more room to play. Next slide. So timing is everything, and you know, I think you've heard it from us who come to these meetings. We're just as urgent about doing something as all of you to help protect our community, but it's also a national objective, not just here, but all across the nation. We've seen it in the news every year for the last several years, the increase in catastrophic fires. And so the chief and, you know, we've got a brand new 10-year strategy for wildfire risk reduction across the Forest Service. And that's the whole nation. And so everybody is gearing up to do more to treat our landscapes, to get proactive, to try to be on the ground, to affect how fire might move through the landscape, whether it moves really fast, whether we can actually stop it, how fast we can stop it will depend on how well we can get some fuel reduction implemented across that landscape. And we also are looking at another round of what I'm going to call unprecedented funding, and we've been talking about it here in this room. We're primed and ready for a whole different set of funding streams that come down through the federal agencies, through our state partners, through community grants, the whole 9 yards. And I know I can't speak to the total number of dollars we're getting on the forest this year compared to even just last year. I want to say it's probably double or more what our normal fuels reduction budget is. And so we're doubling the number of acres that we're trying to get treated this year. And our plan is to double them again next year. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why that is. Go ahead, Anna. With the national effort, they're standing up teams all over to help us plan ahead, to help us strategize on where we're going to move that money. So that wildfire risk reduction team has been stood up on a national basis, and we're all kind of feeding that information locally into a national ability to track it and see where we need to go. The focus and the priority is going to be on these key fire sheds across the nation. Those were developed through a number of tools and modeling that we'll get to in a second, but it has to do with the amount of fire risk based on historic fire spread and communities at risk. So that's exactly why this group is meeting and strategizing about updating the CWPP and looking at defining the WUI, because that is one of those criteria for attracting money to get work done on the ground. And that is, we're here and we're going to stay engaged all the time, with Anna's presence all, full time, but also with the rest of us. We're dedicated to helping the community through collaboration and through whatever support we can get in working on the landscapes that are what we used to call in West Oregon borderless management, because as the video said, the fires don't know where the borderline is. They just know where the fuel is, and they're going to move across the landscape regardless of who owns it. So with that, I'll move to the next slide, Anna. It's a little bit more about the national strategy. When we're talking about gearing up, we're talking about big gearing up, and we're also talking about an extended period of time. We're looking at adding 20 million acres to our National Forest Service forest system lands for treating them for fuels reduction across the nation. And this effort is also dedicated to looking at 30 million more acres of other lands, other federal, other state, tribal, and private lands. And that's where you all come in. And then developing that plan for a long-term maintenance strategy beyond the 10 years. So if you think about just the Bitterroot National Forest, we're looking at treating 250,000 acres over 10 years. That's a lot of acres. When our previous targets have been in the 5, 6, 7,000 acre per year range. That's 25,000 acres per year for 10 years. That's going to take us too long to get there. And we're, our big challenge locally is how are we gearing up to get that much work done? And there's no way we can do it without all our partners and looking at different ways of getting that money out on the ground, crossing those borders and using all the tools in the toolbox to get it done on the ground. But then long-term maintenance, it's not just a one and done deal. It's because stuff keeps growing. So we'll be back. But we want to try to set up these landscapes strategically so that we can get in there, get some work done, and then maintain it over time. Next slide, please. So when we talked about the fire sheds, how were they identified? One of the central factors there is community exposure and that probability that wildfire will impact a local community and infrastructure. So what you see here is a slide of where some of those fire sheds were identified based on a certain set of criteria. Targeting the source of exposure in these specific areas is part of that picture. But also we're primed and ready to be working with our partners and across those boundaries to set those goals up for those landscapes. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. This is where you can see where we are. This is 4 of the top 100 fire sheds in the nation. And we have 6 out of the 10 in Montana are right here in this region. So we've got a lot of folks looking at us to make significant progress. And with 4 of those right here in the Bitterroot Valley, we can go anywhere in this valley and be making progress towards this national goal. Not all of the valley has a big community in between the prevailing winds and where a fire might go. So that's a part of our challenge too, is where are we going to prioritize where we're going all across the valley. But the Bitterroot Front is one project area that we're taking a hard look at. How can we get this set up so we can do that treatment soon? If not this year, when? And a lot of you, I know we've been working on various projects all up and down the front for a decade or better, and there's a lot of treatment already out there. And one of the things we're going to try and do is tie it all together. So next slide, please, Anna. And here's a good reason why we've got 4 fire sheds right here. Ravalli County has, I'm not sure who put these numbers together in the Department of Revenue, but we've been building like crazy, and we've been building in the interface right here in Ravalli County. And so all we're doing is adding to the risk horizon here, and the numbers speak for themselves. Next slide, Anna. So, Mark, you're really good at explaining this slide. I want to say that this represents a model that shows what's the percentile of risk that's going to happen if the fire starts in one of these zones. And the risk is to the community. So when you're in the green zone, the percent risk that a fire starting there is going to reach all the way down to the community is fairly low. And then as you move in your gradient down to the red, then you get into you've got an 80 to 100% chance that a fire that starts in that zone is going to reach the community. And that's what this represents. And you can see that all up and down the front, just how much risk we have from a fire that starts on the Forest Service and going up into the mountains.
It's clipped to the wilderness bound.
And it's clipped, yeah.
So kind of what it's telling us is for the most part, there's 80 to 100% chance of fire starting to blow that wilderness boundary impacting.
Next slide, please.
Broadly defined
Well,
general settlement, not towns per se.
Well, this is a good video. I mean, a lot of folks, when you're watching this, when you're, like I said, when you're down here in the bottom of the valley, you don't necessarily see how far up that slope those homes go. And that's where the community starts. It's the first private home up that slope. And then all the way down to the valley.
This is Bear Creek Canyon. That was just shot a couple weeks ago.
And all of that, if the fire starts on that slope and comes down and out, there's an awful lot of risk there. It's not necessarily a town. It's a community of homes, community of neighbors.
So does the community boundary then push to the furthest outhouse? Is that how it's being defined?
Well, that's how I'm gonna say it, because the community is the whole county. The community is everybody that lives in the risk area. But one of the objectives of the CWPP is to help us redefine what the wildland urban interface community definition is. You know, who is living in that zone and where does it start? For us, it starts at the boundary, right? I mean, we don't have homes on the Forest Service. So it's, as soon as it comes out of the boundary, we're into somebody's community.
What you really find on the west side especially, it's almost impossible now to draw a line from one community to the next. The west side's almost continuous. Now the east side, you can still maybe divide a couple of areas, but you know, the west is pretty much
Continuous.
homes now. With maybe a small break here and there, but not many.
Not too many open areas left. So here's the project. So we're taking a look at 144,000 acres stretched from north to south, from McLean Creek all the way down to Connor. On the front, we're looking at not including the wilderness itself. But we are looking at all of Forest Service between the private land boundaries and the wilderness boundary, including all the inventory roadless areas within that area. That's a lot of acres. It's a big project area for us. It includes from just south of Blodgett Canyon, all the way north is the Stevensville Ranger District, and then all the way south to Connor is Darby Sula, Darby. And so that's, you know, it's a big landscape. So we're doing it together. It's not one ranger district doing one project and the other ranger district doing another. We're doing it all together. We're planning to use an adaptive management framework for that planning, meaning we're not going to try and get right down into all of the nitty-gritty details of every single acre or what's going to happen there. We're going to try to define a set of conditions. If the landscape looks like this, then these are the suite of things that we might be able to do there, and try to cover that under our environmental analysis. So that then when we get to the decision phase, we have a list of things we can choose from and get out on the landscape, see what the actual conditions are, and then pull from that list. Here's what we'll do on a site-specific basis. It's very complex, as you all know. And some of what the video was trying to show is that it's not the exact same forest in every one of these polygons all up and down the front. You just kind of take a look and, you know, we've done active management for 150 years out here. In various places, it's been logged 2 or 3 times, and other places we've already had wildfire, so the conditions there are not the same as they would be in a place that has never had fire or never had active management. It's complex because on various canyons and various ridge lines, the private land goes up farther and gets into those high-risk areas sooner. And as I mentioned, we are among the highest risk in the county and in the state of Montana. And so we are bringing in a lot of resources right now to help us get ready for some new contracts, some additional acres to go into contracts to get some of this new money obligated so that we can get more acres treated on the landscape, not only this year, but next year and years beyond. And that's taking a lot of work. And this particular project is going to give us that 144,000 acres to start doing some work on. And we're thinking about, you know, are we going to be able to get to treat any of those acres that are included in this project area? At least get those contracts laid out and maybe obligated by the end of next summer, if not sooner. And that's part of our challenge. We'll talk about a little bit about the timeline and where we're at. So we have initiated the formal scoping period, which is, there's a if you haven't been engaged in NEPA with Forest Service before, there's a multi-step process we go through when we're doing project planning and environmental analysis. And the first official formal step is to kick off what's called scoping. And that is, we really are scoping out how the public feels, but also what they would like to see us do. When you heard that in the video, it's not necessarily open to a vote, but it's the period of time in which you get your name in the door, on the table, for somebody who wants to be engaged in how we're doing this planning effort. You tell us what it is that you think we should be addressing through this project on the ground. And, you know, it's not necessarily a preference-driven thing so much as that's, why is it important? Who is it important to? And how do you want us to make sure that we're going forward and addressing these things as we're developing the very site-specific proposals as we go? So the scoping period opened, I think it was April 20th, and it will be open until May 20th. It's a 30-day scoping period for an environmental analysis. In May, when we gather up all of the comments that we receive and input that we get from everybody during this formal scoping period, we will use that to develop some responses, but also to help guide us on how we're going to develop a range of alternatives to consider on the landscape. And then that goes into the analysis portion. It's what are the proposals that we're going to analyze going forward. We're proposing to have a couple of different public field trips along the way, but we'll host those. And we'll get out on the landscape and we'll take a look at some really prime examples of what have we heard, what are we thinking, what are the issues, what are the kinds of options that we are going to be considering in the analysis. And then our team, an interdisciplinary team of specialists, you know, from fuels to botany and fisheries to wildlife folks to timber folks, the whole 9 yards, will be taking a look at the environmental analysis portion as soon as we get all the comments in and get them kind of analyzed. They'll develop the alternatives and they'll do the environmental analysis for each of those resources. It won't be as site specific as maybe what you've seen in an EA in the past, but it will be enough to be able to tell the story about what our anticipated impacts are from taking action. So hopefully that's understandable to everybody. And our plan is to get that out for public comment period in August or September, or from August through September, for another 30-day public comment period. And that's where everybody will get to see what is it we're proposing and what do we think the effects of those actions are going to be on the human environment. And through that process, we'll be declaring basically what we think. And that is a very public process described by law. It gives us a chance then to gather more comments in, and then we'll develop a response to those comments as well before we reach a decision on which selected actions we're going to move forward with. And hopefully by publishing a final EA, we'll have identified wherever we may have some weaknesses or any tweaking we may need to do for the project proposals themselves. And then we'll put that out and the public will have another opportunity to object to what we're proposing. And then we do have an internal process to go through all of those objections. I don't know if any of you have been involved in any of that process. It goes through the district rangers, to the forest supervisor, and on to the regional office. And there is an objection review team that then takes all of those and works with us to see if we can resolve all those objections. We meet with the folks who are objecting and see if we can't resolve them with those folks, you know, by addressing whatever questions or concerns or misunderstandings there may have been from what we've presented so far. And then we try to resolve all that. And then the final decision we anticipate by next spring. And again, because we are a federal agency, the public is entitled to due process. We all get to object to what our government does. on occasion, and this is one of those times. And they can, after we sign the decision notice, the public still has another opportunity to take us to court. If there's something in there that they object to at that point in time, that's their resolution, is to take us to court. Depending on how that goes, they can file for an injunction, they can just let parts of the project go forward by not objecting to them and only objecting to parts they really object to. It just depends on what happens at that point. But let's just assume we're perfect, because we are the federal government, and of course, nobody ever objects to what we do. Once we have that decision in place and it's free to be implemented, then that's when we get started in earnest on the ground. Now, between now and then, we may be out there on the landscape, working with all of our neighbors and friends, maybe looking at particular places within the landscape. We have it kind of chunked out on one map. We didn't include that slide here, did we? Various polygons all up and down the front of, are there some opportunities within particular neighborhoods where we can work together to help design something more specific? Now, the more specific may not end up in the CA, but it will be that next phase of implementation. And will we be ready to jump right into a particular neighborhood and get a particular piece of Forest Service that needs to be treated? I'm going to hesitate. Well, I shouldn't hesitate. If there's a particular area that the public would like us to go to first during the scoping and the comments on the EA, that's a great place to provide that input. If you know there's a piece of this landscape that is more at risk than somewhere else, tell us where that is. Yeah. Next slide, Anna. Thank you.
Just to be sure, is it still the case in commenting that if you wish to comment later in the process, you must comment on the scoping?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I said. At the very beginning, you get your name in there and get your name on the table as somebody who wants to be engaged in the project planning through all the way to the
And
end.
would that apply for organizations that want to comment also?
Yes. Yeah, and we actually do, when we go through that objection period, if we get an objection at that stage, and this is going to be my first round as a Forest Service employee too, from start to finish. If we get something at the objection stage and we haven't heard from that individual or that organization at all before that, the objection will get rejected. Yeah. So you can imagine that we have folks who frequently engage in what we propose, and they engage from the very beginning all the way through the end and take us to court.
Are there any additional scoping meetings scheduled between now and the 20th?
So we're not conducting scoping
Oh, you're not.
meetings per se. What we're doing is like this: if there's an organization that would like to hear from us about the project, where we can come and give a presentation, and please invite us and we will come. But right now, we don't have a scoping meeting per se scheduled. We'll have public comment, the public tours, but that will be after the formal scoping period. So in order to provide those comments during the scoping period, this is what our webpage looks like. And we do have the scoping notices here that you're welcome to pick these up before you go out, and the links are included, and you can go to the Bear Forest page and find this link. But basically, comment or object on the project. It's the same button on the web page, but right now we're in the comment on the scoping only. So that's all it's going to let you do at this point. Is you get in there, you go to the project, and you can submit something very simple. It's helpful for the NEPA process if you are very specific. If you say who you are, who you represent, what your interest is in this project, and then what would you really like to see us do. It's not a, I really like the idea. Try to be more specific than that. Give us something meaningful to build from, something that will help us craft an alternative that addresses your concerns from your organization's perspective, your personal perspective, and why is it important to you? as, as an organization or as an individual. And that is helpful for us in the NEPA process. And if you have a particular alternative or an idea that should be included in an alternative, this is a great time to provide that. Like if you have this kind of condition on the landscape, you should consider doing X or Y. Or I am part of this particular neighborhood. We are very interested in having you come out, meet with us. And this is the number of acres and what we are willing to help do. And borderless management, we'd like to see you do this on the Forest Service. Please consider this in your project. So those kinds of things. Anna? Thank you. So again, just wrapping it up. These are things you all know, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Highest fire risk in the state. Time is of the essence. It's about fire risk reduction across the landscape and ecosystem restoration, trying to mimic what Mother Nature should have been doing all along. And then recognizing that fire is a part of the system and it can be a tool, or as Byron and others have said, or it can be our master. It will tell us how our landscape's going to look in the future. And then your support is critical. So I think with that, there am I, and there is Steve, who's been here before as well. And you can reach out and send us direct information if you'd like, but the formal comment period goes through that web page, through that link. I think that's it. Perfect. And there's lots of people here to help me answer questions.
The phone numbers and the information sheet.
I don't know, are the phone numbers on there?
Or her number.
Not my direct number.
So what we've got is the press release from the Forest Service. It's got the link.
Oh, yeah, phone numbers right
And
here.
her, yeah, her and Steve's number there at the bottom. And then the second press release is from the Valley County Collaborative. And there was a story in the paper and their support for the project, but it's their own press release. Talk about why they're supporting the project. And then finally, just a brochure.
I have just a numbers question. You mentioned 250,000, 25,000 acres for your 10 years, 250,000. How does the 144,000 acre project area correlate?
It's going to contribute to that 250,000.
So what happens to the other 106,000?
So that's all across the forest. So we have this side, we have
Oh, okay.
that
So,
side,
all
we
right,
have the
so
south.
the
end,
front is
the west
144
fork, yeah.
and the whole, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's just the target.
Sure.
There's probably more than 250,000 that we need to be treating, but to get our numbers up, that's what we're shooting for.
But
Not all 144,000 acres in the project area are gonna, I couldn't tell you exactly how many acres, because we've already done a lot of work, but what will end up being included in the proposed treatments going forward.
Sure. But the wilderness area, none of the wilderness area is considered within,
Not in this analysis.
not in this analysis. And
Someday.
is that politically driven?
Well, I think it's the bite of the apple or the bite of the elephant. And right now it's the bite of the apple.
I would say that it's not so much political, it's actually
Private.
based on the law.
Law.
It's
Well,
in place
yeah.
what you can and can't do in wilderness. And actually, we have options in wilderness. We can use prescribed fire quite easily in wilderness.
Right.
A project like this could set the framework up to be able to then treat the wilderness. Obviously, we couldn't do the wilderness first because we have that.
Right.
Zone. So ideally, we would be looking, this would be a first step down the road. You would treat through natural fire, prescribed fire, then the wilderness
Yeah.
area would then, where quite often now we have to suppress those fires in wilderness, which again just builds up more fuel.
Right.
So that there is a thought process there.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's not off the table completely,
No,
but
it's not, but it does have different limits just based on its
Right.
wall And in reality, its threat to the community is quite mitigated through the treatment of the adjacent lands to some degree. But we do know that just both in and outside of Roaring, especially this lower land, I mean, we're talking, natural fire return was, down around, could be short as 5 years, 15 years, a lot of this farm goes by. And we've really suppressed that for a lot of years, so we know there's a lot more fuel than should be there, but I think the big emphasis is again, it's not that treatment, it's on that maintenance, so we don't just grow our way back into this kind of situation in the future.
We do have a number of other projects on the books that we're trying to get through the decision phase right now. You've probably heard about the Gold Butterfly project and the Mud Creek project. So there's another one on the east side called the East Side project, and we're hoping to get decisions made on all three of those by midsummer. So that will free up a whole another swath of acres. The third, Gold Butterfly and East Side are on that side of the valley. And then Mud Creek is down in the West Fork. So, this is our opportunity here on this project to address this landscape that's, in this interface. I think there's some of us that are internal that really would like to go up into the wilderness sooner rather than later, but we need to get this one done first.
Is there any concern that the situation, the current economy and inflation could have significant impact on the ability to implement and contract?
I might jump in here because we're getting into the weeds a little bit. So to refocus back, please feel free to reach out to Abby, ask her those questions.
Sure.
After hours or during your work hours, of course, after fire and road council meeting hours.
Sure, there was one more question.
Yes.
Is there a possibility of grazing and or selective cutting being involved in fire abatement?
There's always that possibility. We don't have a lot of grazing on the west side of the valley on the Forest Service, so I mean that would be an excellent suggestion to put in those comments as something as one of the tools to consider.
Years ago, it used to be, up to a certain elevation. But I didn't know if selective cutting might be part of it.
Yeah. So, well, we didn't spill it out here. It's definitely how we get the material out of the woods is part of, the various range of techniques that we can deploy to get the job done. And selective cutting or actual commercially viable timber sales that are the right tool for reducing the fuel load in the forest, definitely on the table.
One other question about the Golden Butterfly, I've been in a lot of meetings about that, it just sort of petered out. What's on the table right now as far as the Golden Butterfly? I know it's not part of the front, but what's going on with the Golden Butterfly?
We're really close to making a decision on the Gold Butterfly project, and it still has all the components. It might be just a little bit different than the originally were anticipated. But that's one of the ones that we're hoping to get a final decision out the door here in the next couple of months. Okay, I don't have any cards, but my numbers on here.
Thanks, thank you. All right, so we are getting close to the end. We got 28 minutes left of the meeting. So, no, you're fine. It's important to know. So it's good information. Appreciate you being here, sharing that with us. Kimberly, did you want to help facilitate this for me?
Again, you want to go through the survey, kind of why you sent that out and what that looks like, and I don't know if you got an email before.
No. Been running around all day.
Yeah. Yeah, we might want to do that piece, because I don't think we're gonna get to
Yes.
a real serious discussion without us saying so.
Yeah.
The fire crew shows up in the morning.
Exactly.
So we won't do that to everybody, but we definitely like to go over a little bit of, I think definitely the survey and then maybe save
Vote for,
the vote
for later.
discussion piece for maybe next time.
So yeah, we'll go through some of the survey results. So I put out a survey in the last email, just to try and, hear people's ideas before the meeting so we can get general idea of where people are at as far as organizational structure, decision-making, membership, and all that goes for us. So that first question was, should we even take the time to create an organizational structure? And fortunately, the majority of people said yes. So very excited to hear that.
So this incorporates the survey response up until what time?
Up until
Until about 5 o'clock.
Until about 5?
I would say about 4.
4 o'clock.
Hold it at
Oh.
4.
4 o'clock.
Okay. all right.
So if you
I was
respond-
early.
Okay. So if you replied after 4, we didn't get it, but we're gonna continue this discussion, so
I
we'll
got part of
generate.
mine in before then, but I
Okay.
got bumped out. Had some issues with the school
Okay,
on my phone, but then when I got home, it worked fine on my computer.
okay. Good to know, thank you. So yeah, we'll continue this discussion and we'll regenerate some of the report, and go over it again to see if anything changes. So looking at different organizational structures, I kind of just put a few different options out there for people to choose. And then there was an option to put another suggestion in there. So majority of people looks like supported the hierarchical organizational structure, and then the team-based structure was gonna be second there. So interesting to see.
That's it for, then we go into voting or membership.
Okay,
Do you want to continue with these results?
yeah, we can just keep going through the results. So should Fire and Road Council create a membership, define its membership? Majority of people said yes, there again. So really good to see creating that membership helps us to identify, especially during decision-making times, who has the right to decide what we're doing, where we're going, how money's being spent. So again, along that line, should we have a formal or an informal membership, excuse me? The biggest difference between that formal and informal membership, kind of as Kimberly had mentioned last time, was, so far we've been operating pretty informally. And with that, it's kind of like a club, a book club. So in order to really start getting work done, make sure we're focused, we're driven, and we're action oriented, having that formal membership really helps to give that formal, hence formal membership. So almost even split there. And then we had an other. For the time being, the informal structure we have with team structure is working until people see whether we can accomplish things with the right people in the room regularly. I don't believe it's necessary to have a formal membership. I believe there should be some organization to membership for decision-making purposes. Okay. Awesome. And then, so how should membership be defined for the Fire and Route Council? I put a bunch of different options out there and figure, it can be a combination of all the options as well. So setting a minimum required meeting attendance. So, we have 12 meetings a year. You've got to show up for at least 7 of the 8 of them, something like that. Minimum required hours of participation. So if you're volunteering or, different roles and responsibilities, I'm admin, I'm putting in 4 hours a week per month or something like that. And then just a combination of those membership should consist of, I don't know what the rest of that question said. Let's see it. And then again, we do not need to define membership. I don't know what that last one was. Should consist of blank.
Which one was that?
That middle one. Does it give us the rest of it? No, you're fine. So we had 4 people vote for the middle one that we can't see. Again, that's what, the more people we have voting on this and giving us their input, the better. I don't want to make any of these decisions, neither does Anna. So the more people we can have input from, the better. You can move on to the next one. So should decisions be made through a voting process? 72% said yes. Next was a maybe. And then 9% said other. And that other in there, it says there will be times when decisions will need to be made in a timely manner without the luxury of being able to follow a voting procedure. That's a really good point. And, to avoid complicating things, but making things easier, maybe having different types of votes for different things. So if the Education and Outreach Committee is planning on a project, for example, Judy's, she doesn't have to come wait for a month to get approval on her poster or her sign, something like that. So we give approval to the committees or something like that to make their own subcommittee decisions. And then there's that overarching decision-making process as a whole group. So again, with this one, if we don't determine a membership, does everyone have an equal right to vote every time? So someone could show up the first time tonight and we're deciding on if we should have a different coordinator. Do they have the same right to vote as someone who's been here since the start, like Eric? So most people said no. 36% said yes. So, and we can discuss this more, but I think, providing an open space for input and feedback is critical, but also kind of drawing a line at who gets to make a decision or not is good. And then getting into decision-making authority. This was actually brought up at the end of last meeting, and thought it was a really good point to bring up and kind of examine as we're going through this, who really has decision-making authority within this group, but then also as we start and try to do projects or whatnot, if we need to get the county involved, who do we need within there that has certain decision-making authorities so we can accomplish the work that we hope. And I believe the majority was, it should be a combination of county, state, federal, and then also the members of the Fire and Roof Council.
Did anybody in here read the Lincoln counties? Lincoln County, to get around, remember there's federal laws on how you spend federal money. And then the way that Lincoln County gets around it with their Fire the Root Council is their treasurer is an appointed county employee. So that's how the Lincoln County is spending I couldn't figure out how they were spending on the title funds.
So
And they're appointed by the county
county
commissioner. The county
procurement
commissioners appointed the
processes,
treasurer
stuff like
as
that.
an employee. And that's how they do it.
So the money goes to the county.
Goes through the county treasurer's office. It's all title state funds.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so really, really good resource. I shared it in the email. I can share it again with the follow-up email, but check it out. And it's super simple too. They keep it pretty basic, clear. So we don't have to get too crazy. I
think it's good for people that aren't members of fire districts in here to know. And the same happens to school districts and fire districts and all districts in the state of Montana that are utilizing federal money. That money is actually controlled by a board of directors. And that board of directors is then voted on by the taxpayers of your county and or of your special district. Of your district, and that's how the money, that's the controlling entity that allows groups like the fire council to spend state and federal funding. Okay, you have to have some way to control it, and that's how they do it. The way Lincoln County got around it is that their fire council actually is an entity of their county, is how they're doing it. They work for the county commissioners.
If I understand it now, it's spending fund, basically, the council might be recommending something that then the state or the county will fund.
That's right.
Because right now, there's no way to get those federal funds to the county.
To the council, that's right. That's exactly right. The county would have to accept the funds, or the state would have to accept them, and then we would have to work through them.
Thanks for bringing that up.
And all that's outlined in the Montana Code annotated. If you go to fire district in the Montana Code, all of that will be laid out.
Either fire districts or school districts, they're exactly the same.
They're exactly the same.
Word for word.
The number of trustees is different, but other things are pretty much word for word.
How you spend federal money in the state.
And local taxes also.
Do we utilize any of that Title III funding in
Denver Valley County?
Yeah.
No, it's all secure, it's the Secure School Rules Act is what it comes from, and it goes to the county commissioners. Most of it goes to the public schools, goes to public schools, so most of it goes in Valley County.
I know that's how they're paying their county forester.
Yep.
Yeah. Which, for those who don't know, having the county forester here is a huge step for us. We are the second county in the state that has a county forester. So super awesome for the county to take that on. Really exciting for us. So, yeah, just wanted to put that little piece out there. Andrew would be here, but he wasn't able to make it tonight, so, yes. All right, where were we? And this just closed on me, sorry.
So this is.
Who has decision-making authority?
So the first one is.
I'll have it figured out for next time, so
Well,
we
let's
can.
go to this one and then I'll come back to that one.
Okay. So. Our hopes for the Fire and the Roof Council is that it becomes this self-sustaining infrastructure that's dedicated to developing a fire adapted Ravalli County. And so I asked, what do we think we need in order to, what do you think is the best way to ensure that the Fire and the Roof Council becomes a sustainable and long-lasting organization for the benefit of Ravalli County residents and its forested lands? Top one there, funding, big one. Next one was the full-time coordinator. So that's great to see that other people feel that need as well. Having more involvement from the volunteer fire departments is next up there. After that is more community member involvement, more county involvement, more partnerships, support, involvement. Yeah, and then more support from the state and more support from the federal government. So in order from most important to least. So Yes.
I have a real question about that, because why was the full-time coordinator not state or federal? Why would that be eliminated?
So we really want this to be local, community based. You know, most things come from the top down. And a lot of people don't like to be told what to do, you know, and they want to be involved and they want to have autonomy in the decision-making process. So our hopes is that, you know, there's baggage that comes with being the state or the federal government, and we just, you know, it complicates things. So in order to really make it locally based, locally driven, local voices that are making the decisions to help guide the state and the federal government, versus us making the decisions. We want you to make the decisions and tell us how we can help and support you to get the things done that we need to do here.
So that would be quite a shift in terms of the history of this organization. And for whom would that coordinator then work?
So that's a good question. And so we've only been around for, I'm gonna get back to your email, but we've only been around for a year. So we have we're very, very new, no structure, no system set up quite yet at all. So
How did the plan that was almost 15 years ago get put together and in place?
So that was through a different group. That was through, so Byron Bonney and the Bitterroot RC&D really led that charge. Okay.
Bitterroot National Forest led that charge
Okay.
after the fires of 2000 with fire funding that came through the federal government and utilized the RC&D to assist us with putting that plan together. And Byron was the key person with the RC&D that they brought in the federal funding. And correct, he was the liaison, I'm gonna call him a liaison officer between the local fire chiefs, the office at that time was the Disaster and Emergency Services, the Ravalli County Sheriff, and the Bitterroot National Forest. And their employees are actually the forest employees are the ones that wrote the plan, did all the GIS work and all the mapping, utilizing that federal funding.
So this
is the original CWPP.
This is the original CWPP.
So in a way, the history is that we did use
the federal fund, yes.
It's a little more complicated.
It's very
We
complicated.
can't take from the federal side, we can't do this direct, we can provide support, so that's really in essence what the federal government is doing, supporting the RC&D doing the work, and by supporting, providing funding down through state and private forestry, through the state, the RC&D, then we can help provide some of the expertise of the RC&D develop the plan for the community. We have some limits on as a federal what we can directly do, so that's why some of this structure is, again, federally, we can't do a lot of stuff directly, but we can do stuff through state, through county, through a council like this, to help the community develop the plans.
Right, and that's matured quite a bit since the original community wildfire protection plan, because all of that's evolved over the last, not quite 20, 15 years.
But it really is to try and help, the federal side, maybe some funding, or maybe some expertise to help really the local community develop the plan. Using all that helps.
Kristen just had a comment that she's the only one on Zoom, that was the Woolly Task Force. Drove that last WPP with Byron Dredge. Yeah, just wanted to make sure that I caught that. Thanks, Kristen.
Okay.
You want to go back to this one? So I only have 3 on here, so I'm not sure. Maybe it got changed somehow, but decisions, making authorities lie in county, state, federal agencies. Fire and the root members have decision-making authority, and then a combination of those should have decision-making. And these must be the others, because they're not even on the.
Okay, awesome. Board with input, okay, yeah, so the other two was a board with input from general membership. Or council members should have right to approve or reject decisions made by the board with input of the record of agency's approval or disapproval.
And this was the last
Okay,
question on the survey.
so for the additional comments, full-time coordinator would be great to see, but no reason for a non-state or federal.
That question, yeah.
Yep. Local stakeholders, leadership and ownership in the council mission will make the difference. Yep. So that last comment is, even if we don't have all of the above, we seem to have a good number of people who attend regularly, start working on the CWPP. We haven't yet clearly asked if there's someone who would be willing to do some grant writing for the funds that the state keeps promising is out there and available to apply for soon. I'm guessing that person would need to rely heavily on the DNRC and or RCD for information to accomplish that. Yes, so funding's still not out yet. We are working on that, and I know Ken and Raylene have offered a few times to help out with the writing portion of that. So couple people identified there. So that was the entire survey. I'll leave it open. And if you want to change, I think you can change your comments, add it if you haven't done so already. And I'll share that again as well. At this point, in making these decisions, are there any other resources or information you would like to see that would help us to make this decision going forward? Yeah, how can I help support make this decision process easier for all of us? Anyone have any ideas or needs, wants?
The Lincoln County example was useful, but we could not enough depth.
Okay.
Because the detail that Arlene brought up of the treasurer being, I assume, an ex officio county employee, because if the treasurer changes, then it's that position that's the county employee. And I assume that their corporate structure is a 501c3, but I don't actually know that.
I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
I
it
looked
wasn't-
under the state website and couldn't find
It
it.
wasn't there, and if
So-
it isn't that, then what is it?
I think
You
they're
know,
using the county, I think they're using the county.
Well,
I
yeah.
think they're going under the county
Yeah,
commissioner.
because if they're not taking money, then they don't need to be.
Yeah, I think it's
the
the county
501c.
commissioners that are.
But if they're competing for grant funding that's not available directly to counties, then they have to be something other than the county.
Yeah, and I couldn't
Well,
find
You know,
yeah,
like the fire
right,
district
right.
is not the county, but is under the county. And really under the governor by way of the county. So
Would it be-
anyway, the business plan would be very useful.
Yes, okay. Would it be beneficial to have one of them hop on Zoom with us and talk to us a little bit about their process and open it up for questions if we have questions for them?
Maybe.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I like
And
that.
how common is that structure? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
do you know that the Flathead one is just like that, or are they different? You know?
Yeah,
so-
yeah. So having examples and maybe
so if
I'm
there-
sure
if
someone
there's
from
one
Flathead.
Kind of common model, then that would be really good to know. If there, if
There's not.
there's three kind of common models, then we'd be good to see all three.
So I just
But
heard
not
the
if
word
they're
5013C. Is that play into this? You just mentioned 5013C. And I just wondered if that becomes something that would be beneficial or could be utilized within this group to find the routes?
Well, it'd certainly be beneficial and necessary if we were to go out to solicit other private grant funding or do our own fundraising efforts. We'd have to set up as a 501c3.
Right.
Yeah. So,
In my dreams, yes, I would love to see that happen one day. Myself, Anna and Kristen have met with several other fire councils, other states here as well. Definitely met with Lincoln Flathead several times. Also Colorado groups. A lot of them, one of the really big ones, it took them 10 years to get their 501c3. So I've heard it's pretty time consuming.
I think time is of the essence. I think that's a really important issue here.
Yeah.
I really do. Because looking at where we're going.
And that's really important if you're pursuing private funds or collecting funding from citizens.
Right.
It's not as important for FEMA grants and other federal and state, which is coming from state and private forestry through the NRC. It's not, you don't have to have that to compete for those. But you have to have some structure in place.
Right.
That has, I mean, if we got one of these grants, we would want a procurement policy, that we want to have a contractor do a lot of the legwork on the CWPP. So if we're part of the county under some umbrella, then they have procurement policies and staffing policies and all of that stuff. But otherwise, we have to do all that ourselves.
It gives us more autonomy. That's the other factor.
Yes.
And I like that. I like the autonomy
Yeah.
to have it. And that has some weight, I think, to really keep in sight.
So the county now having a forester, what is our relationship to that? Position? Also be who knows?
It's being developed. So he is split between county and the Forest Service. So we're still, he just started like a few weeks ago, not even a month. Was it a
Couple
month?
months.
Oh, I guess a couple months. Well, time flies.
Old time.
So I don't have the answer to that. Maybe one of.
I just, he's a county forester. We could contribute some funds to the county to have them assist us with some work on our side, but he's just strictly a county forester. But yeah, I think those are some of the things in time, for this group to kind of figure out what is best advantageous. There's going to be a lot of funds coming down through the state, county through the infrastructure. So chasing private funds may or may not be in the short term. So there could even be a short-term strategy for the council and then something that carries you, 10 years and beyond. So if some things take 10 years to get in place, that might be your long-term strategy of the council. But your short term, it may look a little different. Or some of this immediate funding may be coming from the state. For example, like the update on the CWP. So I think there could be a long-term and a short-term term strategy there.
Okay. Well, it is 8:32 now. Does anyone have any last thoughts, comments, questions, concerns? Okay.
June 7th.
Yep, June 7th is our next meeting, same place, same time. All right. Thanks so much for coming tonight. If you have any questions, reach out anytime.